give the argument to these founders. What are some of the results that would come from them spending more time with the community?
A lot of the things that we created with Axie were actually iterations of something that people don't remember because it didn't really break through.
I downloaded the Ronin wallet on my browser that is still here, pinned on top of my Google Chrome. And I was like, wow, this was actually the smoothest wallet onboarding experience that I've ever had.
I think many people have a hard time understanding what the non-financial utility of this space is.
How would you recommend these products to build an emotional utility beyond the financialization of their token? In today's podcast interview, I am joined by the Titan and the Web3 gaming and growth hacker, Jihoz. Jihoz is the co-founder of Ronin and Axie Infinity. And as we speak, Ronin and Axie Infinity both sit as top 100 chains and tokens on CoinMarketCap, with Ronin at $2 billion FTV, fully diluted market value, and Axie at 1.5 billion market cap. Ronin currently has, according to latest data, 2 million daily active users on the chain. So to say that Jihoz, the co-founder of Ronin, is the expert when it comes to growing, scaling, and bringing Web3 games to the masses would be an understatement. So Jihoz, my man, it is a great pleasure having you here for a second time for a podcast. The first way I want to kick things off is I know you've recently published your Web3 gaming growth handbook that I have just right here. And one of the things that stood out from it is that you are a Titan and you are an OG. You've been building Axie since 2018. And as we go through the book, I did want to start off by asking you, would you say that Web3, growing and scaling a Web3 game, would you say it was easier back then in 2018 when there was less competition, perhaps less product market fit, versus today where it's a bit more of a mature ecosystem, but you have a lot more big players building in the industry?
Yeah, well, first I want to say thanks for having me back, man. Since we first spoke, I've been following your content, and you're always just putting out continuous gold and nuggets of wisdom. That's an interesting question, right? So obviously, things were a lot different back in 2018. And some things I will say were easier, and some things were much harder. So some things that were easier, there was less noise, right? There were only a few Web3 games on the market, and we could confidently say, hey, we, compared to these guys, we feel pretty good about our ability to execute. And there was not that much competition. However, right, with just, a lot of markets that lack competition, you also have very little demand, right? So, so that was right, that aspect. And some other things that were easier, there were less distractions. And you weren't getting, it was actually much easier to know what the community really thought because you weren't getting so many random inputs, right? You had a handful of people, let's say 5 or 6 people that really cared about what we were building. Let's say 5 to 30 in 2018. And it was very easy to talk to all of them. It was really easy to manage this community. It was really easy for me to be the most active chatter in Discord, and it was really easy for me to respond to every single message posted in the Discord. So those are some things that were easier. When I think about the hard parts, I think about the technology, right? There were no tools. We were building Axie on Ethereum, which had very high gas fees. There were less experiments to look at, right? Both our own experiments as well as within the space. People might not know this, right? But a lot of the things that we created with Axie were actually iterations of something that people don't remember because it didn't really break through. For example, there was actually a game called My Crypto Heroes that you were able to play and earn NFTs, and then you're able to sell those NFTs and make a little bit of money, right? So actually even though we're considered the fathers of play to earn, there were things for us to look at, right? Like my crypto heroes, obviously even crypto kitties, how could we improve upon the breeding mechanic? But still, yeah, there was like a lack of basically examples to look at in the market. So those are some of the things that were easier and harder.
Absolutely. So you were pretty much writing the blueprint as you went, as you go. And you've distilled a lot of these lessons that you've learned along the way. You were in the trenches testing out the strategies and pretty much writing the blueprint yourself. And at the first learning that you shared as part of the Web3 Gaming Growth Handbook, which I'm going to be linking, by the way, for the people watching this, is incentive alignment. And one thing you mentioned, which is what Axie was able to do early on, is you were able to use tokens to align incentives with community members. You would put them to work, but the value of the token should be more than financial. It should be emotional and utility driven. That was one of your learnings. Cannot only be financial driven, but there needs to be that emotional and utility value that comes with it. One of the things that a lot of the founders that are watching this, building a Web3 game, most of them have incentive structures. They have giveaway prizes, they have a token that is perhaps live, and they have all the social farming campaigns. However, in an industry that is ever more commoditized, where there's a lot of Web3 games, there's a lot of similar products, how would you recommend these products to build an emotional utility beyond the financialization of their token or of their digital assets?
So this is a thing that's actually harder now because people, it used to be, right? Okay, you want to target more emotional, then you go with NFTs, right? If you want to provide more financial utility, you go with an ERC20. But these things are starting to merge where, right, the meta has gotten to be where when people look at an NFT, maybe they feel some emotion, right, depending on the collection, but they're also expecting or thinking about an ERC20 airdrop. In the early days, I was working for Origin Axies, Mystic Axies. There was some liquidity for them, but they were still pretty illiquid, right? The illiquidity of the NFTs back then made them more skewed towards being an emotional reward or a long-term incentive, right? So, I mean, when you think about even being a startup founder, right, and aligning incentives with your early employees, right, you want to give them, right, something that's like illiquid, right, or that is going to potentially pay off in a really long time if things go absurdly well. Right, but you want people who are long-term thinking versus, right, trying to optimize for short-term gains, right? So that's actually a very, very hard dynamic to strike right now in the NFT space, because when people look at NFTs, they oftentimes are expecting some sort of immediate or pretty immediate return, and that's a dangerous thing. I'm not 100% sure about how to combat that fully, but if you're aware that that's actually a dynamic to think about and be aware of, then I think you're also going to make better decisions. So this is something that's harder. This is something that's harder to deal with these days than it used to be in the past. I think something that could be interesting is like the idea of a vested NFT, an NFT that you give to early supporters that you're going to say, hey, this is never going to get an ERC20. This is never going to get a fucking airdrop. And you cannot sell it for 2 years. But if this project does really well, and if this project is still around in 2 years, right, it's going to be, it should still be cool, right? It should still be something that resonates with them. And striking that balance, that seems really hard, but I think there's something in that idea.
How much would you say, and by the way, you make interesting points, which is the liquidity of NFTs giving them that emotional value. It's like, for example, investing in a company early. It's not a liquid asset that you can just sell on the secondary market. The company needs to go public or get acquired for you to get the value back to your investment. How much would you say today that the emotional value has trended towards things like the mission statement, which you speak about deeply, as well as the founder presence, which you also speak deeply about? How much do you think about it is less about the actual product, aka the NFT, the technology, and more actually, what is the brand, where is it going, and why should you pick this boat versus any other boat that is about to sail?
I think many people have a hard time understanding what the non-financial utility of this space is. If you don't understand it and you can't articulate it, then how can you build something that satisfies that? For me, what I've seen is that, yes, people are interested in the monetary benefits of Web3, but they actually have very, very, very compelling and clear user behavior that shows that they're actually here for altruistic reasons as well. People are part of Web3 because they want to be part of something larger than themselves. They want to be part of a movement. Our generation, millennials, Gen Z, we actually want to feel like we have something to fight for. And our generation hasn't really had that chance. But this is our chance, and that's one of the things that I've seen from many of our most passionate and dedicated community members is they love this sense of belonging. They love this sense that they can be part of a revolution on the internet that makes it more free. Do you think the people in the American Revolution were interested in making some money? Actually, this is one of the things that I wrote an essay on, right? Is like, were the founders of the American Revolution primarily financially motivated, or were they really part of it for the movement and the ideals? And it was actually a combination, right? When if you think about the founders of the revolution, they were, a lot of them, merchants from Boston, right? They hated the Stamp Act, right? The different taxes that were being placed upon them by the government, right? There is this equation of economic freedom and actual freedom that's actually had a lot of historical precedent. And so I do believe that people are here for actual freedom, not just monetary benefits. And actually, and throughout history, these things have also blended together. And people are here because they want to make friends. Loneliness is an epidemic. For most of human history, we have been confined to being friends with the people in our village, the people in our tribe, the people in our pack. Now, for the first time, right, we're able to, just over the last 20 years or so, become friends with anyone, anywhere in the world. And Web3 actually allows us to help these people in a trustless way. We can send them money. We can create these complex social relationships, right? You saw this with the rise of the managers and the scholars. People are like, hey, which market is most important to you? The emerging markets or the developed markets? Well, actually, we need both, right? We need the people who are going to have the means to be able to, right, create the scholarships, collect the Axies, right? And we also need the people who have a lot of time on their hands, who are willing to help to play the products, to use the assets, to provide feedback by creating data around these products, right? And anyway, so that's my take.
This is fantastic. No, this is very good. And you on the topic of non-financial utility, what really stood out from the guide that you wrote was the early research that was conducted by Moku regarding different Axie and Ronin creators and what were some of the desires that they had being part of the community. And you could see we have 4 different desires with specific percentages. So what I'd love to hear from you is what were some of the results that came out of the Moku study? And back in the days, did that Was that surprising to you when you saw that?
Definitely. So when we spoke to Moku about starting a creator program at the depths of the bear market, we assumed, hey, like, if we pour some money, some incentives into this, maybe we get more content. But then we interviewed the creators, and what they told us was actually really interesting, really surprising. We learned that what the creators wanted wasn't actually monetary gain in the majority of cases, but it was actually help with distribution, growing their brand, helping them with information to allow them or facilitate them to make content, right? To be better prepared for launches and to have more amplification. And when you think about it, well, this makes a lot of sense, right? Because most creators, they're just starting out, right? They're micro creators. They're looking to become bigger, right? So at the beginning, right, so if we can, right, become almost this like pipeline for incubation, where we can take micro creators and help them along their journey, right? That's a model, right, that not many are actually pursuing, right? And so I wrote about this in the context of right now people are like probably are wasting so much money on these huge KOL budgets, right? Like, I don't know, we just learned about this word KOL, which I'd only heard in Asia before. Influencer, well, let's just call it influencer marketing, right? So they're using these huge influencer marketing budgets. But I think the thing that is contrarian about us and the way that we, right, in order to win, you actually have to go against the meta on certain things that are very important. And it's called just being contrarian, right? And if you're doing the same thing as everyone, if you're following the meta, then you're going to lose, right? So the key to winning as an entrepreneur is to go against the meta on certain very key topics. And I think where we go against the meta is, sure, we work with some of the larger creators that we believe are thinking long-term and in the right ways. But I think our real trump card, the ace up our sleeve, is that we have an army of micro creators that are creating tons of content for our different releases. And each of these creators, right, they have their own micro community. And I think that's decentralization, right? Like, of course you would prefer to have, you know, a ton of smaller creators, each with their own creator communities, if you think of them as nodes, right? You don't want to just be reliant on one or two huge creators. That's not decentralized either, and that's a huge risk. Maybe they go rogue, maybe they promote a scam.
So on that note then, how would you go about if you were a brand that was pre-adoption, in the sense where you're still trying to build your name, inject your brand into Web3 culture? How would you go about creating an influencer strategy to activate that micro KOL, micro influencers in a way that is organic, that is positive return on investment, and that gets long-term results?
So the smaller you are, the advantage that you have is that you can give way more attention to the people that are in your community, right? So double down on that, right? I can't spend a lot of time with everyone in the Axie and the Ronin community. But some of the founders of these smaller projects, right, they can. And so I would really double down on that. I would create personal relationships with my first 5 to 30 community members. I would become friends with them. I live really close to, almost with, right, some of the early Axie community members. There should be almost that level of like closeness, I think, with some of your early community members. I would personally recruit. This is something I still think they might even be worth it for me to do now. But I would literally personally recruit people into the community, both creators and not creators, right? So doing these things that are super, you know, as I write in the book, doing these things that are super, super, super unscalable, high effort, but show the personal touch, right? The thing that you have, if you're the growth, right, or the marketing founder of a product with no users, you got a lot of time on your hand. You better find something to do. So that's of course going to facilitate you to be hanging out in the Discord all the time, messaging people. Of course, this is harder. This is harder now, right? Because there is a lot of competition for even, the smaller community members. But, that's what I would do is like use your small size to your advantage, right? The fact that you have a lot of time on your hands because you don't have any users.
And that's an interesting one, Jihoz. So right here, when in lesson number 5 that you wrote from the guide, you mentioned something which is the importance of the founder being the most vocal and the most active user within the community's Discord. One thing I see most founders do that I speak with is they outsource the role of community nurturing and community building to the community manager or to the marketing lead or the CMO. And the founder is more once in a while pops in, maybe there's a big announcement, maybe there's something important happening, and then they pop back out. For you, and this is by the way how most teams operate as I've seen today. For you, why would you really insist that the founder needs to be the most active user within the channel? What is the strategy behind this? We all understand that, yes, it's good for a founder to be there, but there's also the opportunity cost that comes with, if you're on Discord, you're not on a call with investors. So what is really the goal and the results and transformation that comes with a founder like yourself being that active and that inside the trenches with your community?
So I actually cannot take the credit for this. And our team dynamic and our founder dynamic is actually pretty unique and actually what allowed me to do this. And when I think about it, right, maybe even if it kind of violates the narrative of my own book a little bit. So I might need, this is like a potentially an area for revision. The reason that I was able to do that is because on our founding team, we had 2 technical founders, right? Both our CEO, Trung, and our CTO, Andy, are amazing developers. That meant that, right, so I'm the chief growth officer now. At the time, I was actually maybe not in the early 2018. I was maybe still the community manager, right? I think that shows how much Trung had vision, I think, for how important community is, that, he elevated me to be, because we didn't have Sky Mavis at that time, right? Sky Mavis was created in 2019. And that's actually what I ended up becoming a co-founder of. So, I have to actually give kudos to my co-founders on this one, where we had the engineers to build the thing that needed to be built, and we had Alex, right, Psych Out, to do most of the speaking to investors and a lot of the operations, right? So we actually have a lot of co-founders, which allowed me to specialize in this one thing, right? So, we have Andy, our CTO. We have Trung, our CEO. We have Alexander, COO. Right? We have Masamune, the artist. So we actually have 5 co-founders of Sky Mavis. I think we actually have a lot of co-founders. People, I think, believe that is too many. That was something that sometimes people ask, "Oh, is that too many? How do you guys make decisions?" It's like, no, we make decisions pretty well. And our Trung can be the tiebreaker on anything if he needs to be. And so I actually think that having enough co-founders sets you up to be able to do that. And so that's kind of like an addendum that I would add there. So I have to give the credit to Trung and the rest of the founders for that, for basically allowing me to specialize, right? Because oftentimes, the risk would be, oh, you're building stuff, right? You're the one raising money. You're also the one working on product. You're also the one who's supposed to, do the community, right? If you're the most active chatter in the Discord, but you also have to build the product and you also have to talk to investors, you might build nothing and then you're just chilling and creating a community around nothing, which is actually dangerous. And then, right, building a community around nothing can be dangerous in the Web3 space. And And then, or, you run out of money, right? So I have to put a caveat on that. I might add that to the book to give a shout out to my co-founders, because it is a balancing act. And I think that because actually, right, this is actually, in my opinion, if you don't have enough co-founders, because that's actually on you. That's actually you're not able to sell, right? So Trung, our CEO, right, he was able to sell me. Obviously, I love the art, and I thought that the early community was great, and I thought that, but I bought into his vision for what Axie could become. I moved to Vietnam in May after finding out about Axie in March of 2018. And that was on him. That was him.
Oh, wow.
Selling, right? And Trung was actually also, right, like before I joined, he was actually really, really active in the Discord, despite being the being the main smart contract engineer, the only smart contract engineer that we had.
I didn't know that story about you. I thought you were always you were always in Vietnam. Very interesting.
Yeah, no, I started as a community member out in New York, man. I was in Chinatown. I remember I was in a Chinatown coffee shop rolling my first Axies and fell in love.
Wow, that's insane. That's crazy. But Jihoz, give us the argument. Give the argument to that founder that has. Again, it's a game of delegation. If you're a solo founder, you have a bigger piece of the pie, but you do have to get better at delegating and putting the right people in the right space at the right spot. So give the argument to these founders. Why, for them, what are some of the results that would come from them spending more time with the community? And why is that worth their time, blocking it off their calendar, 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, 30-minute chunks, just for them to be part of the community?
Your early community, right? Like, that's going to be what creates the culture. And you need to have this strong relationship with the golden cohort, because you're going to find out, what about your product, about your project, what nugget of truth is there that makes it interesting. There's going to be something there that allows you to basically, right, craft your pitch, your positioning, your elevator pitch, figure out, write your white paper, write your founding documents, your manifesto. And they're also going to be the ones that help onboard, right? So one way to think about it, so one of the things that I say is that I learned a lot about managing community from being in a fraternity. So I recommend more founders to study fraternities. So when I go back to my fraternity from college, I notice how I could see how these people are descended from us, right? In a way, right? I could see how the people that we recruited, that recruited the next generation, that recruited the next generation, that recruited the next generation, I could see the link between these people and myself. And likewise, from back in the 1970s and 60s when the fraternity was created. We are more alike than I am to the average person who went to my college that was not in my fraternity. Even all things being equal, right? Like, and so the golden cohort, your initial users, they're going to pass down this knowledge from you, pass down this vision. They're going to be the ones that recruit, hopefully, if you survive, the next generation of users for you. So this is also why it's important, right? Because traditional paid marketing and user acquisition does not work in Web3 gaming yet, or in NFTs yet. If it did, it'd be a solved problem, right? We wouldn't be complaining about adoption. We would have hundreds of millions of users, right? If paid marketing was able to work, just like it does with normal gaming, right? You got 2 billion gamers because of paid marketing, actually. And that doesn't work. The main thing that works in Web3 gaming, NFTs right now, is referrals, right? Referrals account for 80% of all onboarding events into our community. So if you don't tell your community, your early cohort, what's exciting, teach them, and what you stand for, almost train them, right, to onboard people, they're not going to do it. And that's, if your next generation of users isn't coming from the word of mouth, either from yourself or your first cohort of users, I really am not sure where they're going to be coming from.
You tell the story in lesson 1, which is incentive alignment, how when you joined the Axie server, you were given a link that allowed you to earn Axie tokens. And for every 5 token or for every 5 points, you would be able to redeem those for one origin Axie. And this inspired you to go to the community that you were very well embedded in, which was CryptoKitties, and start shilling Axie to them. And this right here is a lesson of having a referral system within a community creates that viral effect and allows your community to become your marketing team, in a nutshell. In today's environment of Web3, what would you say are some of the incentives that make up a successful referral program?
Referrals are kind of different now, right? Because NFT sales only last for 1 day, right? Oh, it either sells out or it doesn't sell out, but it's over, right? This wasn't the case back in the day, which actually is something that made some things easier. Obviously, a lot of things harder because you're not going to sell out. But back in the day, so the Origin Axie sale, the sale was up for 4 months. It was up from February to April. So during that time, we had the referral system live, right? So we actually grew, right, much faster in March, that second half of March and the first half of April. The 1 month, actually, where I had joined, and it wasn't just because of me. There were other things that had, started to pick up. And we grew way faster and sold way more Axies in the second month of the sale than in the first month. Right, but usually what you see is like, okay, a lot of people will buy at the beginning, and then if it doesn't sell out, it's over, right? So in that type of situation, referral system really worked, and the referrals were, very, very juicy in the long run. How to make that work right now? It's difficult. Like, you can give them points. I don't know, how much are points worth? How much are points really worth, especially in a popular program, right? So, I mean, so some of the things that I think are important is, like, rather than sharing a cut of secondary market sales, right? I think we need to experiment with, right, more of a primary sale model for referrals, because you have a lot more margin to work with there, right? So that's one of the things that's a little bit tricky with referrals in Web3, is that most of the volume is secondary market volume, or the primary market sales are only happening for like an hour or something. So it's something that actually, right, like, I want to think about more on Ronin. Whether that be, maybe we need to have like links for Katana, the DEX, where you're getting like a very tiny slice, but of a much larger number, because it's like DEX volume, right? So those are the complications with referrals right now. Of course, I mean, when we think about first principles, though, all community members have some base incentive to get people into the movement, because they want more friends. They want the project to survive. They want more friends. And, right, they have incentive alignment via ownership of the assets in the network. And making people understand that, right? And training them. They're not just gonna they're not natural born chillers, right? Not everyone is. But you can teach them. You can teach them. One of the things that maybe was important for me is my first job was actually as a recruiter. So I used to have to call people on the phone. And I saw how, in the beginning, I was not great at speaking to people and getting them to make major life decisions. I got better, and I saw how everyone, right, like sucks at doing cold calls in the beginning, but once you train, you get a lot of experience, something that can rapidly improve over time. It's not like an innate thing. Therefore, right, like you can train your community and help them to be these onboarding funnels for you.
Very interesting. Very. You made a nice point, which is primary market referral volume, which is correct because most of the time we see that happening on secondary. So how do you unlock that with the primary volume? There was a very interesting part within lesson 4 of the guide, which is gifting. With gifting, what you were doing very early on into the process was the Axies were worth $2 back in the days. So you started gifting these different community members that you wanted to onboard. And your cost of acquisition per community member depended on the percentage of Axies giving away versus how many you actually converted into becoming long-term community members. And this is an interesting one. It had me sitting here and thinking, interesting. Most often teams, a real business wants real community members and real users. But most NFTs end up trying to aim for having supply prices or a secondary volume price that is very high. I want my NFT to be at 1 ETH, 2 ETH, 3 ETH. But what this prevents you to do is to have the ability to onboard the masses of people. The high floor price of your NFT collection prevents it from being used as an acquisition channel, as an acquisition mechanism to onboard new community members. So from your experience with the Axie Infinity, would you say that there actually is a strong play and a strategic play with having a lower priced NFT collection?
The NFT projects that have actually broken through have been the ones that have been able to expand, right? So you might have the Genesis collection, but they've been the ones that have been able to expand by having the subsequent collections. I mean, if you think about it with Pokemon cards, right? You have the first edition, the shadowless, but you also have the everyday, right, normal things that people still want. And it hasn't been fully figured out, but yeah, we were able to have millions of people own NFTs because there are millions of Axies. There are now 11 plus million Axies. But that doesn't mean that the Origin Axies and the, Mystic Axies aren't doing well. In fact, right, because there's so many people in this, and there are more, people in the community who respect. How are you, right? Like that's actually what creates a lot of the demand, right? You need to have in my opinion, like different levels within the community. That's what creates a real society. Is, right, people being like, hey, wow, those are the OGs. Those are, or those are the champs, right? You need to have like levels. You need to have levels in a functioning society, in my opinion. That's one of the characteristics of a complex society. So yeah, I think that it's still not fully figured out, but if you can have different types of collections at different price points, that greatly facilitates your ability to have adoption.
Interesting. Okay, very nice. If we are to move to learning number 7.
Another way to think about it is like you want to be like Polo, right? Polo has, right? So Polo has like purple label, right? They have like rugby, but they also have, right, like the cheap stuff that you can even get at the I forget what it's called, the mall where they just sell all the stuff that didn't get sold.
Yeah, the
right?
outlets.
The outlets, right? So be like Polo, right? Like have many different sub brands of different levels, right? Because you can't just only be like a luxury brand, in my opinion, if you actually want mass adoption, right? Like Polo, Ralph Lauren, they go for mass adoption, right? Everyone knows about it. A lot of people own it. Is this a totally different strategy than right? Something that's more exclusive. By definition, something that's exclusive cannot be mass adopted, right?
That's a good point, and this is where having a clear objective of what is it you're trying to optimize for is important. If obviously you're building a Web3 game, exclusivity doesn't help, it doesn't work. But if you're trying to build a luxury brand, a luxury fashion perhaps in the Web3 space using RWAs or fidgetals, then there's a play. But I would understand how in the context of Web3 gaming, exclusivity only gates the ecosystem in a way that makes it hard to enter by a lot of people. In learning lesson 7, you mentioned something interesting, which is something we can hitchhike on with the referral program. How will your community member refer other friends to your community if they do not know how to sell it to people? And that is where in lesson number 7, you highlighted the importance of having a clear to understand, easy to share elevator pitch about your brand. And you even show the differences in the elevator pitch between 2018 and 2023 with Axie Infinity. So my question to you, Jihoz, is as a Web3 gaming founder watching this today, what makes up a successful, what is the chemistry of a successful and powerful elevator pitch?
So one of the things that I found is that this was one of the only reasons that it was good to go to conferences. Because when I went to the conferences, I would lose my voice because I would explain to every single person I met what Axie was. And if you're paying attention to people, you understand when they're paying attention to you. And I would tell the story of what we were doing in different ways, mixing it up, just also because I'm bored myself of telling the same story the exact same way every time, right? You gotta change it up to amuse yourself. Sometimes take a risk, right? Sometimes the riskiest way, right, was the most exciting and interesting way, right? It's like, hey, what if I told you about a game that's kind of like Pokemon, but you can make money, right? That was like me, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna do the most ridiculous one, right? But sometimes it works better, right? That's something I even learned from like doing the voice recordings, right, with our team. It's like, oh, you always do a funny one at the end of a recording session. Oftentimes that will end up being like the one that the animators or whatever want to use for the voiceover. So yeah, I would say, right, rather than talking about anything that's too generic or too applicable to everyone, I don't know, like I would just say go tell the story to everyone you know. Go to conferences and tell the story of your journey in different ways and see what resonates with people. And you also have to understand, right, how do you tell when someone is interested in what you're saying? Their eyes will light up. They're not going to be interrupting you. They're not going to be, oh, nice to meet you, I'm leaving. Right? So I don't know, like you also have to understand verbal and non-verbal communication. So if you don't know that, then you should study that first. But yeah, if you know that, then go to conferences, tell the story of your brand, of your journey, of your product in different ways to different types of people, and take notes on what resonates, and then use that to craft the way that you present yourself.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Jihoz, one of my final questions that I have for you, and we'll kind of do a wrap up and a summary of what we've covered so far, because I know we've hit on a lot of different points. You mentioned something about you, and what is really interesting is most of what is written in that guide that I have here, 25 pages, are strategies that you yourself are an avid user of. Like this is not you sitting down and doing like a ChatGPT research on how to nurture a community and then you wrap it up into, no. The gifting, for example, I downloaded the Ronin wallet on my browser that is still here, pinned on top of my Google Chrome, because after one of the Twitter spaces that we had with my business partner Kermit back in February, you sent a message to Kermit. You were like, hey, I really liked you and Leon co-hosting this. Send me your wallet. I'm going to gift you each an Axie. So this right here was an example of you using the gifting, and this exposed me to the Ronin ecosystem. It got me to download the wallet, And I was like, wow, this was actually the smoothest wallet onboarding experience that I've ever had. You email and password, you can recover your account. It was incredible experience. Number 2, one of the parts that you talk about, which is in lesson number 10, the importance of leading with data, social proof. It's one thing about achieving, you said it was actually a very good sentence. You said, if you achieve something but you don't share it in data, it's as if it never happened. So for you, you're virtually every day publishing data about the volume happening on Ronin, the volume happening on Axie, the prices, the fluctuation in gases. So you're an avid publisher of data, oftentimes data that a lot of teams would seem like, oh, you know what, I'd rather not share this. So what would you say is the strategy behind having that data, publishing it to everyone and making it public?
I used to think that this was something that I discovered, but I was wrong. So when I looked at some of the great marketers of all time, and I guess I'll say Blackpink and President Ronald Reagan, if you go to Blackpink's Instagram, literally all you see is, oh, we hit 10 billion views on Boombaya, right? Like, it's literally just them bragging about what crazy number they hit on one of their on their singles or their albums. And so I found that mind blowing, right? Because Blackpink, I think they're like the greatest marketers of the last like 8 years. Why? They actually literally made Korea mainstream. Right? When I was a kid, people were like, oh, are you Chinese or Japanese? I'm like, no, my mom is Korean. And they're like, they had no idea what that is, right? Now everyone knows what Korea is because of BTS and Blackpink. Anyway, so, this is not just something, that's specific to Web3. This is what Blackpink does. President Reagan, right? It's morning in America. Right? Today, more men and women went to work than at any other point in our nation's history. That's data, right? That's data marketing. That's walking the walk and talking about it. And people want to be part of a winning movement, right? This is a movement. People want to be part of a winning movement. People want to be contributing to a winning movement. And if you talk about the data that they're helping to produce, that aligns you. They understand what the goal is. Oh, we want more views on Boombaya. You guys are bragging about it. I'm going to listen to Boombaya even more, right? The Ronin network has 2 million daily active addresses. Okay, that's important. I'm going to go use the Ronin network. I'm going to do my part. I'm going to contribute. And that's what creates the link between the data and the behavior. Of course, you also have to beat your chest too, because the people on the sidelines, they might be skeptical. Oh, Web3 gaming. Oh, Axie, but that's so 2021. Well, okay, like you cannot argue, because I don't believe in arguing with people. You can, right, in that book, the famous book that everyone should read, you cannot win an argument. Nobody has ever won an argument. So what are you going to do? Just put the facts out there and let people decide for themselves.
Let the data speak. Beautiful. Jihoz, before we wrap up, what lessons and recommendations do you have for Web3 founders today that are looking to grow their Web3 brand? What are the lessons that you have or recommendations that you would give them?
Well, let's think about the next chapter. Let's co-create here, Leon. Let's think about the next chapter of the book. So one thing that I omitted, so this will be like a special for the viewers. So one thing that I find really important or really useful is to track every single growth experiment that you do. And put it in a spreadsheet, right? And do the ICE framework, right? Look up what that is if you don't know what the ICE framework is, right? And do that for a while and get into that habit, and then that will change your way of being, your way of thinking, right? Marketing and branding is a way of being, right? And you have to create these systems and execute them until they become part of yourself, and then maybe you can get rid of them. I don't keep track of all my growth experiments right now, but I did in 2018 and 2019 and 2020, and then that just became the way that I am. So yeah, I also would definitely recommend doing that, seeing what works, tracking your experiments, and making that part of your personality. If that becomes part of your personality, then you're going to be growing.
Beautiful. Very good tip. I appreciate that, Jihoz. So far, just to recap the conversation, what we've covered is, at the very beginning, we talked about how to create incentive alignment with the community and create incentives beyond just the financial motivation for a community. So creating that utility and emotional utility that comes with the project. We've then hit on KOL marketing, the importance, how you are very much against the big KOL campaigns versus activating those smaller micro influencers that are going to be there to support your brand. And you've mentioned how, especially at the early days of the brand, the more time you have, the more you should spend one-on-one time with these people, getting to know them, becoming friends with them, and fostering that strong relationship that you have with them. Next, we spoke about the Moku research study that realized that most people were in creating content around Ronin because of the brand growth that they would get from it, not mainly because of the monetization or monetary value that could come from it. We've then hit on gifting, the importance of that, how gifting, especially having an NFT collection that is accessible to the masses, could be a powerful tool to onboard users within your community. And then we've spoken, of course, about the founder funnel, my favorite part, how having a founder that is there, present and active, that is going to be part of shifting and building the early culture in the community. And finally, we spoke about data. Why highlight the data? Jihoz, my man, as always, it was a great pleasure sharing this time together, and looking forward to the next chapter when it's published.
It's always a pleasure, man. And I also want your advice, right? Like, should I publish edits or updates to it, or should I just start working on the next one, right? And so we'll talk about it. But yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. And thanks so much for reading the growth playbook for the Web3 gaming growth playbook. And thank you so much for printing it out. It means a lot, man. You know, I spent years in obscurity writing things that definitely were very valuable, but nobody was reading them. I know that they were valuable because I used to write up investment theses on things like Tesla when it was 2013, 2014. Nobody would read them. So it's, to me, right, it's just an honor, and it just feels amazing that, hey, when I publish something, put something out in the world, there are readers, right?
It was earned, man. It was earned, Jihoz. You're putting good work out, and the market is rewarding you for that. So I appreciate the kind words.
Awesome, man.